Because of her long jet black hair, the people called her the Bat Princess. Once the most cherished daughter of the royal family, she was abandoned, blinded, and even beheaded in a single cruel night. Her parents shielded her from social hardships, pushing all the duties of appearances onto her younger siblings. Yet she bore endless burdens alone, working day and night as if her days had 25 hours. Until the day war erupted, and the truth buried for over 20 years was finally revealed. To rescue her sister held hostage in the empire, she accepted her parents' request. Without hesitation, she marched onto the battlefield. Unleashing her mighty magic, she burned enemies into ashes. But as she gazed upon the pitiful soldiers of the opposing nation, a pang of mercy struck her heart. Still, the warriors behind her urged her on relentlessly. To protect her family and her people, she steeled herself, slaughtering nearly half the enemy army. Yet while she fought and bled on the battlefield, her parents surrendered first, betraying her to the enemy. All just to exchange for her sister Nikla. From that moment, she fell into hell itself, abandoned by both her homeland and her own family. The enemy emperor, Japan, demanded to take her as his mistress, promising to grant her every wish in return. But she swore never to betray her country. After her refusal, Japan's concubines tortured her mercilessly, gouging out her eyes, leaving her broken and scarred, suffering torment every single day. It was not until 10 long years later that she finally returned to her homeland. But the moment her feet touched home soil, the people showered her with filth. They cursed her as a traitor, a sellout, the villainess who sparked war only to surrender to the enemy. Even her younger siblings mocked her. From the very beginning, you were nothing but the royal scapegoat that we never once saw you as family. Her mother, before marrying the emperor, had an affair with the uncle whose magic was strongest. You were their illegitimate child, that's why the emperor killed her after taking the throne. As royalty, you were never even allowed to show your face in public. Only a servant who once delivered her meals whispered the cruel truth. Through the years, every crime, every disgrace, was forced onto Ross's shoulders. The very family she loved, the very people she bled to protect, all wished to see her torn apart. In the end, her own parents dragged her to the execution platform. And under the curses of the crowd, her head was severed. When she opened her eyes again, she had returned 10 years into the past. It was the day of Nikla's 16th birthday. That was when the enemy nation sent a decree, demanding to marry a princess of Betrayal as their bride. Everyone believed Nikla was the perfect choice. But this time, Ross vowed to make every last one of her tormentors pay. First, she would join hands with the tyrant of the enemy empire, and together reduce this kingdom to ashes. Thus, she boldly declared her will to marry Emperor Japan of the Chariot Empire. Yet the tyrant was ruthless, infamous. Countless people had been executed for nothing more than a careless word. Even the former emperor had died by her hand. She treated her subjects as less than human. She even kept 6 mistresses, each one an enemy of the other. Nikla, in such a place, would surely suffer endlessly. As expected, the family, unwilling to let Nikla endure hardship, immediately decided Ross would be the one to marry. And with false affection they told her, "Ross, you are our pride." But what they did not know, this time it was they who had been made the sacrifice. Soon Ross was married to Japan. She would walk alongside the tyrant, to personally destroy the kingdom of Betrayal. But the wedding had barely ended when Japan left her coldly behind, forcing her to live alone in the palace. On the very first day, not a single maid came to serve her. But Ross was no longer the weak, submissive woman she had once been. Without hesitation, she seized a maid by the throat and hurled her across the room. Then she conjured flames, burning the girl's hair to ash. Terrified, the maid confessed at once. It was the head maid in league with the emperor's concubines, who ordered no one to serve the new empress. Ross immediately had the head maid dragged before her. And then she smashed the entire chamber into ruins. Ordering the head maid to clean it up herself, the head maid erupted in fury. "You mad woman! Do you know who I am? I was appointed by the emperor himself. You low-born bat princess, how dare you expect my service? The emperor is surrounded by countless beauties that you're nothing more than a decoration. You can't even manage your own chambers. What right do you have to be empress? Still, if you beg me nicely, perhaps I'll let someone lend you a hand." That twisted, ugly face dragged Ross back to memories of her past life. of those ungrateful beasts who had betrayed her. Without hesitation, she yanked the head made by the hair and hacked it into a messy bird's nest. Let's see. Between a mere ornamental empress and the emperor's head maid, who will he protect? The scissors grazed across the maid's cheek again and again, blood splattering with every stroke. The head maid's screams pierced the air, but Ross showed not a shred of mercy. Compared to the torment she had endured in her past life, this was nothing. Soon Ross's reputation as a villainess spread like wildfire. Back in her homeland, she had once toppled the crown prince himself, earning the title of the infamous Villainess. She raised taxes on the people, spent her days in endless meetings with nobles, coerced the king to rewrite laws, and even ordered Beliar's trade ships to attack allied nations. With her being the only black-haired royal and her ruthless, immoral ways, she became known far and wide as the Bat Princess. When word of this reached the emperor's 6 mistresses, they immediately sent her an invitation, planning to put her in her place at a tea party. Ross was still considering whether to attend, until she saw the name of the hostess, the 4th consort, Elisa. In her past life, it was Elisa who had led others to mock Ross in prison, forcing her to bark like an animal. Even after her eyes were gouged out, Elisa still came to torment her. This time, Ross chose Elisa as her target. She dressed in full splendor and attended the tea party. There, the women sneered, calling her a low-born bastard, mocking her filthy black hair, claiming she was unworthy of the silver-haired emperor. Ross didn't hesitate to strike back. You're nothing but the bastard children of mistresses. One day, people will laugh at your impure bloodline too. She turned her words on Elisa. And you don't even have silver hair, and if your child looks like you, everyone will call it a bastard. Even His Majesty wouldn't acknowledge a mistress's spawn. Elisa was so enraged she screamed and stomped with fury. But Ross left in high spirits, smiling as she said, I look forward to the next tea party. But tonight I'll be dining with His Majesty, so I won't waste my time with you. Elisa had never suffered such humiliation. Rage and jealousy consumed her. At once, she ordered a servant to deliver Ross a letter. It claimed the emperor had summoned her for a private meeting. Ross saw through the lie instantly. Yet she played along, walking to the arranged location. Suddenly, a massive bucket of flour crashed down from above, covering Ross from head to toe. The mistresses burst into triumphant laughter from above. Isn't this the great empress? Ha! So you're dining with His Majesty? I'll give you some color. Better than that filthy black hair of yours, isn't it? But Ross wasn't the least bit angry. She simply returned, changed into a fresh gown, and washed every trace of dirt from her body. Meanwhile, the emperor waited in the dining hall for a long time, assuming she had been crushed by the humiliation and would not appear. Yet Ross finally arrived, dressed in splendor, and her hair now shone a dazzling gold. Her beauty in that moment left even the emperor stunned. He gulped down 13 cups of wine in a row before he could calm himself. At last he asked, Why dye your hair again? To his surprise, Ross replied calmly, I didn't dye it, that I was always blonde. In Beliar, golden hair was the mark of royalty, and of unmatched magical power. But to preserve her brother Eli's claim to the throne, her parents lied to her, saying if others knew she was blonde, power-hungry nobles would swarm around her. And so they forced her to dye it black, proof of her role as nothing but a pawn. From the very beginning she had been treated as expendable. In her past life, it was Jeppin himself who revealed this truth, and even healed her blinded eyes. Now Ross spoke it aloud, making one thing clear to Jeppin. She had always been the scapegoat. Now that I am blonde and beautiful, don't I match your Majesty even better? Jeppin's face turned cold. I expect nothing from you. This city already has plenty of women with far more value. Women like you, I've seen countless. Remember this. The moment you cross the line, you'll be discarded. But Ross didn't flinch. Instead, she baited him. I know many secrets of Beliar, including the platinum ship. At those words, not only Jeppin, everyone present went pale with shock. The platinum ship was the Empire's national trade vessel. It departed from home ports, circled through vassal and trading nations, then returned fully laden. Chariot Empire, cold and barren, depended on this trade for survival, and the platinum ship was due to return next month. Yet in her past life, she remembered, Capricorn Kingdom would ambush the platinum ship 1 month later. The cargo stolen, every crew member slaughtered. Jeppin never received the goods. Beliar secretly aided the attackers and covered up the true culprits, reaping a fortune in return. Ross had opposed it then. After all, the two nations were allies, and Nicola was already Jeppin's bride. But her father, blinded by ambition, went ahead regardless, and he threw the blame squarely onto Ross. In the end, Jeppin poured imperial funds to cover the losses, hunting the culprits in vain, until the trail went cold. At the mention of the platinum ship, Jeppin froze, his expression sharp. "What about the platinum ship?" he demanded. Calmly, Ross revealed the truth. In 1 month, the trade vessel would be ambushed. She gave the exact time and place. Jeppin immediately ordered it recorded. "The platinum ship is the Empire's lifeline. This shipment is filled with metal goods. It cannot be lost. If the culprits appear, kill them without mercy. But if this turns out to be a wasted effort, you had better be prepared." Soon, word spread like wildfire. Ross and the Emperor had spoken at length in private. Jealousy drove the fourth consort, Elisa, into a frenzy. She wasted no time inviting Ross to the Duchess Jan's birthday banquet. Ross arrived, once again dressed in radiant finery. But in the garden, she unexpectedly encountered the third consort, Sasha. In her past life of darkness, Sasha had been the one faint light. When Ross's eyes were gouged out and she endured torture, Sasha had visited her in secret. She had apologized for the cruelty of the other mistresses, healed Ross with her magic, and even brought red wine to ease her pain. But in her past life, Ross had been paranoid. Fearing poison in the wine, she had knocked it to the ground. Later, she had even licked the spilled drops, only to discover there had been no poison at all. She never forgot Sasha's kindness, and now she intended to invite her to her own tea party. But first, she had to deal with the loathsome mistresses. At the Duchess's birthday banquet, Ross appeared for the first time with her golden hair unveiled. In this world, the closer one's hair was to gold or silver, the greater the magic it symbolized. Guests whispered in awe. Her golden hair beside His Majesty's silver. Truly a perfect match. No wonder she is the noble empress. The mistresses, however, twisted their faces in jealousy. Elisa secretly ordered her lackey to trip Ross. Ross, smiling faintly, marked the culprit in her heart. After exchanging pleasantries with the nobles, she deliberately sought the girl out. In an instant, she clamped a hand over the lackey's mouth and drove her sharp heel straight into the girl's foot. Blood spurted across the floor. The crowd screamed in horror. Ross sneered. "Tripping me in secret. Such a pathetic trick. No matter how many times you try, it won't make the Emperor look your way because you're worthless." Elisa trembled with rage and smashed her wine glass. A sharp shard sliced across Ross's cheek, leaving a thin trail of blood. The guests gasped, urging her to flee. After all, Ross was infamous as the villainess, capable of anything. But Elisa stood smug, convinced of her untouchable status. The Emperor adored her. Why would he punish his favorite for a low-born empress? To her shock, Ross grabbed a fruit knife and slashed downward, ripping Elisa's elegant gown in an instant. Elisa shrieked, clutching her chest and crouching low. Any movement and she would be exposed in front of all. Ross looked down on her with cold disdain, as though watching a pitiful clown grovel at her feet. The nobles sneered as well. A mere mistress dared to strike the empress. Serves her right to end up humiliated. Watching it all from the side, the sixth consort, Camilla, found herself intrigued. This empress was far more interesting than she had imagined. Meanwhile, uneasy, the Emperor had followed. The moment he entered, he saw Elisa, disheveled and half-dressed, being helped out. Her attendants immediately swarmed him, chattering complaints. Jeppin's face darkened in irritation. "Who gave you permission to speak to me? Do you even deserve it?" His words made them all tremble with fear. Soon Jeppin learned the details from his men. Storming toward Ross, he roared, "You truly dare! You slashed Elisa's gown, a mere empress striking the Emperor's mistress?" Elisa's homeland was Yulain, the neighboring kingdom. She came from a count's family that controlled 70% of the trade, and the two nations had long been at odds. The former emperor, a tyrant, had even sworn to annihilate Yulain. Since then, its king refused all ties with Jeppin, forcing him to rely on the count's family for commerce. The more he thought, the angrier he grew. "If this breaks our trade with the count's house, it severs our only link to Yulain. Can you bear that responsibility?" But Ross showed no fear. Instead, she patted her chest lightly and smiled. "You don't have to worry, Your Majesty, because I am by your side." At that moment, a physician was summoned to treat Ross's wounded cheek. But Jeppin struck the medicine chest aside with a single blow. "Insolence! Do you seek punishment? You hold no value to me." Yet Ross couldn't help but laugh. She dipped a finger into her own blood and smeared it gently across Jeppin's lips. "Soon, Your Majesty, you'll recognize my worth. All you need is patience." Flustered, Jeppin's heart raced. Even afterward, back in his chambers, he found himself distracted from state affairs. Ross had not been bluffing from her past life's memory. She knew the King of Yulain would soon meet his end. The scandal of his secret affair would explode into public shame, printed across the newspapers. If used wisely, this incident would grant Ross leverage in diplomacy, making her far more valuable than Elisa. Thus, Ross sought an audience with Jeppin, requesting permission to travel. To her surprise, Jeppin insisted on accompanying her, going so far as to cancel every imperial duty. The entire palace erupted in whispers. This was clearly a honeymoon. The emperor had never traveled with any woman before. Truly, the empress was favored above all. When Elisa heard the news, she nearly exploded with rage. Ross had assumed it was just a simple trip together. But Jeppin demanded more, dining together, even sharing the same bedchamber. Yet every time Ross was accompanied by new attendants. Jeppin's face darkened. "Why is that man always at your side? And from your homeland, no less." Ross chuckled. "Are you jealous?" Jeppin flushed with anger, snapping, "Nonsense. Have you been drinking?" Ross didn't bother arguing. She rose to leave. In an instant, Jeppin pulled her down onto the bed. "You don't need to prove your worth. Bear me an heir and your place as empress will be secure." But Ross's mind was fixed only on revenge. She shoved the tyrant aside without hesitation. With her chin held high, she declared, "I'll consider it, when I'm in the mood." Then she dressed and strode out. Jeppin was left utterly stunned. All this time, she hadn't even desired him at all. Meanwhile, Ross rode off in her carriage, only to be forced to stop a short distance later. A band of highwaymen blocked the road, intent not only on robbery but on slaughter. Ross's eyes lit up with excitement. She surged forward, unleashing blazing fire magic that reduced the bandits to ash. The more she killed, the more exhilarated she became. Fueled by her seething hatred, her power now eclipsed even what she had once wielded on the battlefield. When the road was cleared, she strode toward the carriage that had been attacked. From her past life's memory, she recognized the man instantly, the King of Yulain himself, clutching his young mistress in his arms. In her last life, both of them had been slain here during their secret tryst, leaving the queen grief-stricken and enraged. Now, when Ross exposed his identity, the king denied it, desperate to keep his secret. Ross's smile turned sharp. "Tell me, if Her Majesty the Queen learned she never even received your so-called 18-year-old diamond treasure, and yet this mistress took it instead, what would she do? We are both royalty, surely I cannot keep this truth from her." The king collapsed to his knees, trembling and begging her not to speak a word. Ross's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Then why don't we sign a little contract, right here, right now?" Cornered, the king had no choice but to agree. Soon, Ross arrived at the inn. Jeppin sat with documents in hand, waiting anxiously for her return. The moment he saw her, his face twisted with grievance. "So, a walk is more important to you than sharing the night with me?" Ross ignored his sulking and handed him a parchment. "I happened to run into the King of Yulain. We exchanged a few words. He not only seeks trade but also wishes to maintain friendly ties with Chariot. Here's the proof." Jeppin's eyes widened. The agreement was real, signed by the king himself. Yet only 2 months ago, that same king had openly declared he wanted nothing to do with Chariot's trade. Ross offered no further explanation. Instead, she pushed him down with a smile. "I'm in a good mood now. Why don't we take a little ride together?" Jeppin instantly forgot everything else, lowering himself to kiss her deeply. The witch, reborn, struck down her enemies and used her past life knowledge to rebuild ties between nations. She even persuaded the emperor to send the 4th consort back to her homeland. But soon new malice surfaced. Every day someone delivered a dead cat to her quarters. Ross didn't flinch. She ordered the carcasses cooked into dishes. In her past life, she had endured war, prison, and torture. Back in her homeland, the people had pelted her with animal corpses. To her, such things were nothing new. Yet during her meal, she discovered something far worse. Poison had been slipped into the food. At once, she commanded all the palace chefs and maids to be gathered before her, and coldly ordered them to finish every last bite of the poisoned feast. Though confused, the servants obeyed, forcing the food down. One maid barely nibbled a single bite. Then Ross smiled sweetly and said, "Spit it out, the food was poisoned. Rinse your mouths with water." Panic erupted as everyone clawed at their throats, vomiting in terror. Ross, unfazed, strode directly to the head maid. "The culprit is you." The woman's face drained of color. How could she have known? The supplier swore it was lethal poison. Ross didn't waste a word. She seized the dish and shoved it down the head maid's throat. The woman collapsed unconscious, carried away by the guards. Judging from the poison, it wasn't meant to kill, merely to torment Ross. What they didn't know was that in her childhood, her parents had forced her to ingest poisons, under the guise of building resistance, but in truth to make her test food for her siblings. That was why Ross could detect toxins so easily. She recalled a maid's whisper. The head maid often consorted with the 4th and 6th consorts. This time, the true hand behind the plot was the 6th consort. Meanwhile, word of the poisoning reached Jeppin. Outraged, he confirmed the culprit was indeed the head maid, and that Ross had forced her to swallow the poison herself. For the first time, the tyrant openly praised Ross, summoning the imperial physician to attend her. The courtiers were stunned. The cold, unfeeling emperor actually showed concern for someone? Soon, the imperial physician hurried in to treat Ross, even casting a calming spell to hasten her recovery. With a cheerful smile, the physician declared, "Only the empress can weigh so heavily on His Majesty's mind. You are the empire's treasure. Even a mere cold must be tended to by my own hands." Fear rippled through the servants. They had failed to detect the poisoning, and now that the empress was so dearly favored, a single word from her could doom their entire families. Yet Ross did not punish them. Instead, she rewarded each with a pouch of gold. She even ordered their wounds treated, calling it compensation for their role in testing the food. Grateful tears welled up. The empress was truly kind-hearted. Now with money, their sick loved ones could finally be saved. They realized it had been the head maid's lies that poisoned their view of her. From now on, they would serve the empress with all their loyalty, knowing it was the path to a brighter future. Watching their transformation, Ross smiled with satisfaction. Mercy and power. Together they were the art of ruling. Soon after, the 6th consort caught wind of the news and promptly sent an invitation, summoning the empress to dinner. Ross accepted the letter, then suddenly turned to Exon. "You can sew, can't you?" she asked. But at the banquet, Jeppin's mistresses provoked her relentlessly, mocking the witch, even sneering that the tyrant had peculiar tastes. They went further, threatening to kill Ross's attendant as a warning. One even poured red wine over her head. Without hesitation, Ross shoved the woman straight into the pool. She smirked coldly. What a filthy drowned rat. That very day, the tyrant received a formal invitation from the king of Elaine. Ross's worth was undeniable. She had become the bridge between two nations. Jeppin immediately chose to take her along to the royal banquet. But just before departure, jealousy consumed him. "You're not bringing Exon," he snapped. Upon arriving at the Elaine royal palace, King Jerome himself greeted them with the queen at his side, terrified that Ross might expose his secret affair. Jerome put on an overly friendly smile, but the nobles around him were far from welcoming. They pointed at Jeppin, whispering insults openly. How can the sacred palace of Elaine allow such people to enter? The empress is a low-born bat princess, and he, the infamous tyrant. His Majesty must have lost his senses to invite these vermin here. Elaine will surely suffer for it. With the two nations long at odds, their contempt for Jeppin was hardly surprising. Jeppin's face remained calm. He was long accustomed to such slander. After all, his dark reputation preceded him. Even the former emperor had perished by his hand. But the late emperor had been no better, bullying weaker nations, seeking to dominate the continent. From that day on, Jeppin had been branded the son of the devil. The nobles mocked him still, cruel and ruthless, just like his father. Magic is all he has while his people starve to death, our only satisfaction. Ross could no longer hold back, her gaze turned chilling, her aura suffocating as she glared at them. Go on then, say that again. The nobles only laughed louder at her words, spewing more filth and scorn. Ross's eyes hardened with a flick of her hand, flames engulfed the offender, reducing him to charred ash. Silence crashed over the hall. The air turned suffocating and even Jeppin stood frozen in shock. In the past, his mistresses would only feign concern, telling him not to mind, claiming dogs can't spit ivory. Or they would tremble in fear, unsure how to respond, some even pretending not to hear at all. But this was the first time someone had stood tall, fierce and unyielding to defend him. Jeppin took long moments to process it, realizing she wasn't doing this to curry favor. Then Ross laughed softly. I'm only doing what a wife should. The burden is mine to bear. You needn't worry. I've long grown used to standing in front of others. No one will slander my husband. In truth, it was repayment. For in her past life, Jeppin had once shown her pity, had reached out a hand when she was drowning. She turned back to the nobles, voice sharp as steel. I should cut out your tongues and burn you to ashes. The nobles collapsed to their knees, trembling, begging her for mercy, for the sake of peace between their nations. The tyrant roared with laughter. For the first time, someone had stood up for him. Jeppin looked at his scandal-ridden empress with new, unexpected interest. As for the uproar, King Jerome declared the nobles guilty of insulting honored guests, and sentenced them all to death. Thanks to Ross's ruthless display, diplomatic ties between Yulain and Chariot advanced with startling speed. Before long, the two nations were officially allies and word spread like wildfire. People whispered in awe. The empress had secured foreign relations without leaning on her family. No wonder she'd driven the fourth consort back home. Compared to her, that mistress wasn't even worthy of mention. Soon, Ross found herself surrounded by admirers, nobles and attendants alike, eyes shining with devotion as they hovered around her with endless flattery. None dared deliver dead cats to her again, but Ross held grudge as well. Instead, she ordered dead rats sent daily to the sixth consort's chambers. The sixth consort was livid, storming in her quarters. That wretched woman again. She injured a Yulain duke during the visit. An unforgivable offense. Why hasn't His Majesty punished her? By custom, she should be condemned for obstructing diplomacy. Even if she holds some value, it should change nothing. So why hasn't the emperor cut her down, instead choosing to forgive her? The sixth consort raged in jealousy, smashing and throwing things in her chambers. Could it be His Majesty truly likes her? She slips so easily into his bed, while I haven't so much as touched a single finger of his. Her face twisted with hatred, consumed by a single desire, to kill Ross. Yet Ross was the empress, constantly surrounded by watchful eyes that if she left even a trace, she'd end up like that foolish fourth consort, exiled back to her homeland. So the sixth consort set her sights on Ross's attendant. His name was Exon, the sixth son of Viscount Pennyworth from the Kingdom of Barrier. Sold into servitude due to his family's poverty, he was quiet, withdrawn, and unremarkable, just another palace servant. And yet, why had the Bat Princess chosen him? Why had she insisted on bringing him when she married? With his handsome young face, surely the two shared a secret affair. The consort's lips curled into a cruel smile. Dead cats couldn't break you, then I'll carve into your precious heart instead. But she had no idea. Ross kept Exon close only because in her past life he had once saved her. She simply wished to repay him. They had barely even spoken a handful of words. Exion's skills lay in cooking and needlework, talents Ross admired greatly. That day Exon went to brew tea, but he never returned. Suddenly a maid rushed in, pale with fear. My lady, Lord Exon has been gravely injured, he's been carried away. Meanwhile, the culprit, the sixth consort, admired the blood on her hands, her lips curling in a triumphant smile. That wretched princess had single-handedly mended the rift between two nations. Those who challenged her, those who schemed against her, all had met miserable ends. Ross immediately summoned the finest physicians to save Exon. They managed to preserve his life, nothing more. His wounds were too deep. The terrible scars carved across his face would never fade. A deliberate warning, left by the sixth consort. Ross trembled with fury, while her servants shrank back in terror, afraid that staying near the empress meant someday sharing Exion's fate. Ross cupped Exion's scarred face in her hands. Gently she whispered, "You're still handsome, even with scars. You're still the man I like." Exen exhaled, relief softening his rigid shoulders. He even murmured about preparing her tea, but Ross urged him to rest instead. Then, blazing with wrath, she stormed toward the sixth consort's palace. The consort, meanwhile, savored the memory, the thrill of tearing open Exion's lips. To her, he was nothing but a pretty toy. Now disfigured, surely the empress wouldn't raise a storm over him. The next moment, the doors exploded in a blast of fire. Ross stormed in, her body blazing with flames, murderous intent rolling off her in waves. The sixth consort flinched in shock. But she quickly recovered, sneering with false confidence. Well, isn't this Her Majesty the Empress? I heard your servant was injured, how unfortunate. But servants are worthless, weak and foolish, no wonder he became trashed. You're the favored one, aren't you? His Majesty's healing magic is powerful, he could mend him in an instant. Except, the Emperor never heals anyone. Certainly not a mere servant. If you're so capable, why don't you beg him yourself? Ross ignored her taunts, eyes sharp as blades as she advanced step by step. Panic finally cracked through the consort's voice. Stop. Don't come any closer. I am pure blood chariot. His Majesty dotes on me most of all. Touch a single hair on my head and you'll be cast out. Ross didn't hesitate, she seized the woman's head in her hand. Flames burst from her fingertips, setting the consort's hair ablaze. The woman shrieked in agony. Ross's grip shifted, clutching her face with cruel force. Her voice dripped venom. Now you'll know what it feels like to be scarred for life. The guards burst into the chamber, shouting as they rushed forward. Ross recognized them instantly. These were the very executioners who had gouged out her eyes in her past life. Rage surged. With a flick of her hand, a massive fireball roared forth, reducing them to smoldering charcoal. She then advanced toward the sixth consort, staring down at her ruined face. Memories clawed at her mind, their cruel jeers from her last life. How pitiful, a low-born wretch daring to spurn his majesty. How shameless. Ross smiled sweetly, mocking in return. Oh my, how pitiful, filthier than a rat in the gutter. And now, it's your turn. Another fireball sparked to life in her palm. The sixth consort broke down, tears streaming as terror consumed her. At that exact moment, the Emperor himself appeared. His eyes swept the scene. The disfigured mistress, the guards reduced to ash, his expression hardened, voice low and cold. How bold. What is it you think you're doing? Ross lifted her gaze, lips curling into a calm smile. Why, it's nothing more than a wife's jealousy. The Emperor burst out laughing at her words. Instead of punishing her, he praised her, calling her adorable. After that, the maids scrambled to curry favor with Ross, and noble factions began extending olive branches, some of them powerful enough to be worth her attention. Even her shameless father from Barrier sent letters, seeking to mend ties. Ross didn't bother to read them. She burned them to ash. One day she vowed she'd send them all to hell. Later, Ross thought to stroll through the gardens to chat with Sasha. But Sasha overheard the servants whispering about the Empress's attendant, gravely wounded by the sixth consort, still unable to leave his bed. Alarmed, she hurried straight to the infirmary. There she saw the terrible scar carved across Exion's face. Her heart clenched. Would he fall into despair? Would he abandon his mistress? Yet Exon thought only of continuing to serve Ross after all. She had avenged him, risking enmity with the sixth consort's entire faction. His only fear was that his ruined looks made him unfit to remain by her side. An empress worthy of an emperor should not be dragged down by such a blemish. But Sasha gently reassured him. You needn't worry. The empress is kind even to someone as insignificant as me. Do you truly think she would cast you aside over a scar? Exon couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Sasha seemed to misunderstand the empress. Ross had never been some gentle saint. She'd been used, discarded, treated as nothing but a pawn. To rise from a forsaken princess to empress by her own strength proved she was far from soft-hearted. And yet, Exon still wished to remain by her side. Sasha gasped suddenly. Wait, do you harbor improper feelings for Her Majesty? Exon shook his head firmly that he was only grateful. The empress had defended him even at the cost of offending the sixth consort's faction. That he was but a servant. His only wish was to serve her well. Unbeknownst to them, Ross had arrived at the doorway, intending to chat with Sasha. only to overhear the exchange for reasons she couldn't name. Her heart sank with a quiet pang of disappointment. Still, she composed herself quickly, stepping in to ask after Exion's injuries. When the physician assured her that aside from the scar he was fine, she invited Exion to resume his duties at her side. To Exion, the scar mattered little. As long as he could continue eating and working, it was enough. Ross even removed his bandages with her own hands, feeding him carefully herself. Once she saw the scar didn't hinder him from eating, only then did she allow herself to relax. The scar across Exion's face was severe, but the Emperor's healing magic could have erased it in an instant. The problem was, Jeppin would never waste his power on a mere servant. Ross resolved to draw closer to him, little by little. In truth, scarred or not, she still found Exion handsome. After all, she had marched on battlefields before. Wounds and scars were nothing new to her. Standing nearby, Sasha sensed she was intruding and quickly changed the subject. She invited them to the spring festival, a beloved holiday among the common folk, filled with feasts and merriment. The words struck Ross with a pang of guilt. She had never once attended a festival in her life. Yet she remembered vaguely. In her previous life, something had gone terribly wrong at that very celebration. It had even made the headlines. Staying hidden in the palace might be safe, but to secure her footing she needed to take initiative. So Ross decided firmly she would attend the festival and she would take Exion with her. Meanwhile, Jeppin received a formal letter of protest from the sixth consort's father, a powerful duke. Worse still, the duke had rallied other nobles to join him. Together they threatened. If the emperor did not punish the empress, they would sever ties with the crown. The emperor dismissed the nobles' complaints with ease. It was nothing but the empress's jealousy. Besides, it was the sixth consort who injured her attendant first. Ross merely sought retribution. But even as he spoke, Jeppin's brow furrowed. Wasn't Ross being far too attentive to that servant? A sharp pang of jealousy stabbed through him. Meanwhile, back in Barrier, her parents grew restless at her silence. They sneered in private, speculating she must be imprisoned, cut off from the outside world. They had once pinned their hopes on her pretty face, imagining she'd coax secrets out of the enemy emperor. Now, seeing no results, they scoffed that she was useless. Perhaps the tyrant is tormenting her even now, crying her eyes out in misery, they jeered. Worse still, rumors reached them. The empress's servant bore a hideous scar, yet she still kept him at her side. She was even taking him to the festival. She doesn't even invite her own family. Who then is her true husband? Her father fumed. What they didn't know was that when Ross walked through the streets with Exion, passers-by often mistook them for a young couple in love. Though Ross felt grateful the emperor had permitted her outing, the wall of guards shadowing her every step made her smirk. Protection? No. This was surveillance. But Ross only wanted to enjoy the food. This was her very first festival. In Barrier, she had always envied her younger siblings, who laughed and danced their way through such celebrations. Her parents had always locked her away with endless chores, claiming the crowds were too dangerous for her. Now at last she could wander freely. With a careless wave, she told her guards to relax and enjoy themselves. She sampled every dish she could find, utterly unconcerned about poison. In her past life, she had been forced to test poisons for her siblings. Her body had long since grown resistant. Then something caught her eye, a vendor selling puppies. The man eagerly promised that dogs could protect their masters. Ross didn't need protection herself. She was more than capable. But Exion, he was vulnerable. Perhaps 2 loyal watchdogs could guard him from unseen threats. She even recalled battlefields of her past life, where warhounds had fought alongside soldiers. Dogs, after all, were far less likely than humans to betray. Her thoughts were shattered by sudden chaos. A pack of snarling hounds burst free from their cages, lunging straight into the crowd. Guards surged forward, forming a wall around the empress, pistols drawn to gun the beasts down. But the vendor shrieked in protest, "No! These dogs are priceless. You can't shoot them." The vendor stammered, explaining that the hounds had once been meant as guard dogs for noble estates. But they'd been returned for being too vicious. He'd planned to sell them to the army to guard the powder magazine, until this chaos broke out. Ross only smiled sweetly, her eyes glinting with fire. She stepped forward without hesitation, flames unfurling from her hand. In her past life she had seen warhounds trained on countless battlefields. Fire closed in around the beasts, A deadly promise. Submit or burn to ash. The dogs whimpered, trembling, then knelt in obedience. Satisfied, Ross withdrew her flames and promptly purchased the entire lot. Hidden in the shadows, a man cursed furiously, smashing a bottle at his feet. Useless mutts. Broken so quickly I didn't even finish placing the powder. But then he sneered. With the festival crowd so dense, even a spark would cause devastation. Yet just as he struck the match, a cool voice cut through the air behind him, starting a fire in a crowded market. How bold. He spun around, pale with shock. How had this woman discovered him? His tracks had been perfect. Ross's boot drove into his chest, hurling him across the cobblestones. Guards swarmed in instantly, pinning the would-be arsonist to the ground. Ross's gaze was steady. She remembered this incident from her past life. It had been a terrorist attack that shook the empire. Her temper was vicious, but her sense of justice was absolute. Those who had shown her kindness she would repay tenfold. But those who raised a hand against her, she would crush without mercy. Word of the festival incident soon reached Japan. The investigation confirmed the empress had no dealings with the would-be arsonist. It was his plot alone. The emperor had known all along. Ross would never stoop to terrorism. It wasn't her style. Still, she had burned the man's face so badly that he had to be treated before any execution could proceed. When Ross returned from the festival, all she offered Japan was a pitiful little bouquet, one that Sasha, of all people, also received. To Exen, however, she gifted 2 fierce hounds, even taking the time to personally train them. Exion's expression dimmed. To him, the dogs felt like replacements. Ross burst out laughing at the thought. They're not your replacements, they're your protectors, she teased, handing him the right to name them. But Exen was hopeless at naming. The best he could manage were silly things like Woofy and Fluffy. In the end, Ross took matters into her own hands. With a wicked grin, she christened the dogs after her beloved siblings, Nikra and Ailey. To her, it was poetic justice, trampling them underfoot every single day. The emperor summoned Ross, and she assumed it was to discuss the attempted arson. Instead, his very first words were, "Dismiss Exen. I'll see him promoted, wealthy, even housed, but he will not stay at your side." Ross arched a brow. "And your reason?" Japan faltered that he couldn't very well admit that Exen simply irritated him. So he muttered instead, "His scars are hideous. He's unfit to serve beside an empress." Even the aides present winced. The emperor could erase those scars with a flick of his hand, yet he used them as an excuse. Ross's eyes blazed. "Exen stays that he is my attendant. The scars are the sins of the 6th consort. They are not his burden to bear." Then with a wicked grin she added, "If you're truly bothered, I'll just put a muzzle on him. That way you won't have to see the scars. After all, I'm a wicked woman. What could be more fitting than a wicked woman with her loyal hound?" Japan blinked, then burst into laughter, loud and unrestrained. Mad, sharp-tongued, utterly fearless. This woman was unlike anyone else. For now he would let it go. 4 days remained before the fated attack on the Platinum ship. Ross spent every moment drilling her 2 hounds, finally naming them 77 and 47. Drawing on battlefield training from her past life, she put the beasts through grueling exercises in the palace gardens, half in preparation for war, half imagining them tearing into the emperor's mistresses. In 4 days she would prove her worth beyond question. Yet Ross refused to reveal the ship's exact coordinates. She insisted on boarding herself to command in person. Japan, however, scarcely listened. His attention was consumed by one thing: Ross spending her afternoons training dogs with Exen. He couldn't stand the sight of them alone together. His order was swift. "The empress is forbidden from training dogs in the garden. From now on, she'll do it beneath my window." The servants were stunned. The emperor guarded the view from his windows obsessively. No one was ever allowed near it until now. And then, arms folded, head tilted, he declared petulantly, "I'm coming aboard the ship as well." 4 days later, the harbor bustled with soldiers and sailors. Ross stood ready. Japan appeared at her side. His voice was cruel, his threat sharp. "If you're lying, I'll make you wish you were dead." Yet his hand brushed her cheek with a startling gentleness. Ross could only sigh inwardly. This man was insane. That he had banned her from the garden not as punishment, but just to place her training sessions where the view was prettier. The training yard beneath his window. Ross had assumed it was just another way for Jeppin to keep her under surveillance. Perhaps today, she thought grimly, he meant to be rid of her altogether. But this was also the day she would prove her worth. As the platinum ship sailed into open waters, a sudden ambush struck, pirates swarming from all sides. Even when told they faced the might of the Chariot Empire, the raiders showed no fear. Their orders rang out, "Kill them all, leave no witnesses." From the enemy flagship strode a Capricornian officer, armor gleaming, voice dripping arrogance. "With the platinum ship's cargo, our war chest will overflow. Chariot's strength will crumble, and your tyrant will be left powerless." He sneered further. "Capricorn will rise as the continent's greatest nation. The so-called tyrant will choke on his defeat." Then came the final order: "Sink the platinum ship. Let it rot on the seafloor. Let no trace remain." But just then the seas thundered. A colossal warship broke through the mist. Upon its prow stood none other than Emperor Jeppin, and Empress Ross at his side. Jeppin's eyes darkened as he took in the scene, fury radiating from him like a storm about to break. Everything unfolded exactly as Ross had foretold. Jeppin's heart tightened in disbelief. On the open sea, judging positions was near impossible. How had she been so precise? The pirates, realizing their plot was exposed, launched a frenzied assault. Imperial soldiers tensed, eager to retaliate, but the platinum ship was laden with priceless cargo. One wrong strike could ruin everything. Then Ross let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Throwing off her cloak, she declared, "My worth has only just begun to show. This is the moment I've been waiting for. Watch me closely, remember every second with your own eyes." With that, she vaulted onto a small skiff and charged alone toward the platinum ship. Cries of alarm rippled across the deck. Men wanted to rush after her. But Jeppin raised a hand, his tone cruelly casual. "If she dies, she dies. Saves us the trouble of tossing her body overboard." Exion's gaze darkened instantly, fists clenched at his sides. Yet the adjutant saw the truth. The Empress's intelligence had been flawless. The Emperor would never kill her, and that faint smile tugging at his lips. It was the look of a man savoring the spectacle. Just as Ross had said, Jeppin was determined to witness with his own eyes every movement she made, every expression she wore. By now, Ross had already leapt onto the platinum ship. Pirates surged toward her like a tide, but her stance was unshaken, her gaze sharp, her aura blazing. Compared to the imperial armies she once fought in her past life, these pirates were nothing more than vermin. With a flick of her hand, Ross unleashed a storm of fire, turning raiders into blazing human torches. Her control was razor sharp. Flames seared only the pirates, leaving the precious cargo untouched. She had turned the battlefield itself into proof of her worth. The longer she fought, the stronger her magic surged. Terrified, the pirates abandoned their loot and scrambled back to their ships. As for the arrogant Capricorn officer, Ross's fist pierced straight through his chest, ending his boast forever. Enraged, the pirate vessel fired its cannons. A deafening explosion split the air, the blast hurling Ross violently into the sea. Fortune favored her. She swam with practiced skill, clinging to a drifting plank of wood. Without it, she might have been lost. Yet victory was hers. The enemy flagship lay sunk, the officer's corpse remained as evidence, and the ambush was shattered. Through blood and fire, Ross had proven her value. Exhaustion overcame her as she closed her eyes. In that fleeting darkness, memories surfaced. Parents smiling, once calling her their pride. A brother and sister who once looked to her, always asking and always receiving. But all of it had been an illusion. Human hearts were far darker than she had once believed. Treasured when useful, discarded the moment worth was gone. In this life, she would claw for recognition, not for glory, but for the chance to make her family regret. The search party's ship finally reached her. Soldiers hauled Ross onto the deck, her body limp and unresponsive. Panic spread instantly. A high priest rushed forward, pouring healing light over her wounds. Yet the magic fizzled uselessly, nothing changed. Then a heavy hand settled on his shoulder. The priest whirled around, anger brimming, only to falter when he saw who it was, the Emperor himself. His gaze lingered on the pale woman at his feet, and for a fleeting moment he remembered how that small frame had always stood between him and the world. Without another word, Jeppin strode forward, shattering the vow he had never broken, never to heal another. He recalled her voice, teasing yet defiant. Sooner or later you'll admit it, I'm the woman you need most. Now sweat drenched his brow, heart pounding as the truth clawed at him. She had been right all along. Before their eyes, wounds knit together, color returning to her cheeks. Slowly Ross's lashes fluttered open, her stunned gaze locked onto him, and around them soldiers gaped. For the first time in history, the cold, unyielding emperor had broken his own rule, to save someone. But after that day, the empress did not see the emperor for an entire night and day. She pressed her hand to her temple, frustration gnawing at her. If only she had cut things off cleanly. Why let them linger into such awkward silence? Just then, the chamber doors opened. A royal attendant bowed deeply. Forgive the intrusion, your majesty. I come at his majesty's command to ask after your health. Trailing behind him came the third consort. Ross had already crossed paths with them in the corridor. Their sharp expressions and heavy steps looked more like a group marching to battle than visitors. Yet when the door swung wide, the sight before her was startling. Brilliant flowers piled high, handsome dogs wagging at her feet. The room looked less like a palace chamber, more like a dreamer's cottage. All of these, from His Majesty? Truly you are blessed beyond envy. The third consort gushed. A flicker of something unreadable passed through Ross's gaze. She had expected punishment for her reckless gamble, not gifts. Such generosity was nothing but hush money, foolish to hope for anything more. The third consort, oblivious, chattered on. And today the sixth consort is returning to her family's duchy. But the words were drowned by the crash of the door. The sixth consort stormed in, her face swathed in bandages, fury burning hotter than fire. You vile enchantress, she shrieked. What sorcery did you use to make His Majesty heal you with his own hands? The dogs bared their teeth with low growls. Rather than fear, the sight only sent the sixth consort into a frenzy, her screams echoing through the palace, all nobility stripped away. Even as the guards dragged her away, the sixth consort thrashed and spat venom. Just you wait. The Duke of Basilov will see you ruined. Her shrill voice faded down the corridor. Ross tilted her lips in a faint smile, as if bidding the madwoman a final farewell. Back at her desk, that name lingered in her mind. Basilov. It stirred an echo from her past life. Yes, she remembered now. When Nikla later became empress, she had written of a grand ball at the Basilov estate, and of some unpleasant incident that had left her shaken. As Ross pondered, a maid appeared with a sealed letter. The crest confirmed it. An invitation from House Basilov to a grand masquerade. But the timing jarred her. In her previous life, that ball had been held months later. Was this sudden change tied to the sixth consort's meddling? Either way, she needed to know what kind of man the Duke truly was. Records described him as not only a shrewd merchant, but also a physician of near-legendary skill, hailed as a master of medicine. Beyond that, little of worth was written. Her eyelids grew heavy with tedium, until in a flash her gaze sharpened, a spark of realization igniting. Snapping the book shut, she let a sly smile curl her lips. So, this place isn't clean either. Then it falls to me to bring order. Alone in his chamber, the emperor sat deep in thought. Memories of his youth rose unbidden. His immense power was not born of bloodline alone, but forged in merciless training. The torment of those years never left him. It was that crucible that birthed the strength he now wielded. And yet, what he witnessed that day, if judged by raw power alone, that woman might already surpass him. What kind of past could have carved such strength into her bones? His lips curved despite himself. Reluctantly, he admitted it. He was no longer immune to her allure. When evening came, Ross was surprised. Instead of punishment, the emperor extended an invitation to dine with him. The feast spread before her glittered with excess, far more lavish than anything she had seen in the palace before. Then, without warning, he spoke of the white platinum ship. One of their officers slipped. We now hold undeniable proof. His eyes narrowed, voice colder than steel. Capricorn will not escape retribution from Chariot. Though Capricorn's king insisted the raid was the act of a rogue officer, in the end he had no choice but to pay a crushing indemnity and cede a full third of his lands. The affair proved Ross's worth beyond doubt. Yet the emperor's mind lingered on one question. How had she known so precisely what was coming? At his words, her pupils contracted ever so slightly. She forced a calm reply. Back in Belir, I once received a letter of supplication from Capricorn's king. But that was years ago. Even if I aided him then, there's no proof left now. And who's to say Belir is entirely innocent of this matter? Her chin lifted, voice steady. If you demand arbitration between the two kingdoms, I will not flinch that I am Chariot's empress now. The man paused, silence heavy, his doubts far from eased. Ross pressed on. Once I was a core figure in Belir. Naturally, I still hold certain intelligence that if it pleases your majesty I could share, selectively. He studied her intently, bewildered. Why would Belir discard such a sharp, formidable woman, and brand her the Bat Princess? Outsiders said she brought nations to ruin, that she sowed chaos in government. But if she were nothing more than a scapegoat, why would she herself hide her golden hair and suppress that immense power? Ross chuckled at his question, irony glinting in her eyes. It took me half a lifetime to see the truth. Every deed I did for the good of the realm was twisted into sin, and I became the scapegoat. Her smile turned sharp. The crimes of the royal house were piled upon me. Do you think I'll forgive those dogs? Never. Her words struck a chord. The emperor's chest tightened. He too had once been nothing but a tool, forged through nightmarish training he could never forget. After a pause he said almost softly, "Then I will grant you a reward. Speak. What do you desire?" The courtiers nearby froze in shock. Was this truly the ruthless emperor they served? In truth, he was no fool that he wanted to see the breadth of her ambition. Did she seek a city? To banish his concubines? Or did she mean to seize the throne itself? Ross's lips curved. Petty spoils mean nothing to me. What I desire is the world. A world I will share with you. Her voice was like steel wrapped in silk. As your empress, I will burn down anyone who dares stand in your path. That I will bloom for you alone. All I ask in return is your acknowledgement that I am your one and only empress. Bold. Reckless. No one had ever spoken to him so brazenly, yet the words hit home, deeper than he cared to admit. Slowly, a rare smile broke across his face. Even if you had not said it, I was already thinking the same. Then let us walk this path together, my one and only empress. From that day on, her position as empress was sealed, and the news swept across the empire like wildfire. What shocked everyone most was that the cold, merciless emperor began bringing her to every banquet, introducing her with pride. This is my one and only wife. Tonight was the grand masquerade hosted by House Bazarov. Though he knew she would return unharmed, unease gnawed at him. After all, Bazarov was closely tied to concubine 6. If not for the trial he had to oversee, he would have escorted her himself. His eyes darkened, voice dripping with jealousy. Don't tell me, you plan to bring that pet dog of yours? Ross laughed softly, amused. Relax. Sin and the guards will wait outside, they won't be stepping in. Only then did his shoulders ease, though he hid it behind a curt nod. Fine. Take as many guards as you wish, he said with forced nonchalance. Ross only curved her lips in a knowing smile and agreed without hesitation. As the chimes announced the start of the masquerade, the grand hall lit up with dazzling chandeliers. Ross entered gracefully, her golden hair shimmering under the candlelight, instantly capturing every gaze in the room. Wherever she moved, whispers followed, admiration and envy alike. Hearing the cascade of flattery, her smile curved with quiet satisfaction. Suddenly, a man stepped forward, bowing deeply. I am tonight's host, Bazarov. Though his manner was polite and his smile refined, Ross's eyes hardened. No matter how perfectly he acted the gentleman, she could not bring herself to return his smile. For in her past life, it was this very man who had destroyed her. When the Chariot Empire was ambushed by Belai's army, she languished in prison while Bazarov himself testified, accusing the Bat Princess of treason. She remembered vividly. Exon had once rushed to her cell, reporting that villages lay eerily empty. The evidence, fabricated by Bazarov's word alone, that false charge had dragged her into hell. Dragged back to the present, she raised her glass. Their toast looked elegant to onlookers. Yet the moment the champagne touched her lips, her vision blurred and her body weakened. Staggering, she fell into Bazarov's arms. He chuckled lowly, voice smooth as poison. Exquisite Empress, you truly cannot hold your liquor. Allow me to escort you somewhere private. In front of all the guests, the man suddenly lifted the Empress into his arms. With a gentle push, he opened a hidden door and descended the narrow stone steps, leading into a dungeon filled with prisoners. He placed the Empress on a chair, his movements seemingly gentle, yet chilling to the bone. A twisted smile curved his lips. After drinking that drugged wine, the empress would never wake for the entire night. Just as he was about to return to the banquet, his gaze shifted toward the corner, landing on the naked man lying there. A dark, vile desire surged within Rove. What he loved most was dissecting those who had once betrayed their lovers, cutting them apart piece by piece. That to him was the purest thrill and his greatest sense of accomplishment. Just as he raised his hand to strike, a woman's voice suddenly echoed behind him. Startled, he spun around in panic. The empress stood there, flames blazing in her palm, a faint smile on her lips. "Thank you, Rove, for inviting me to the real masquerade." Rove's eyes widened in disbelief. She had drunk the poisoned wine. How could she still be standing? The empress licked the corner of her lips, her gaze sharp and taunting. "Did you forget? I once served as a living vessel for poison tests. A mere dose like that could never frighten me." She had intended only to feign weakness, to uncover the truth in secret. Yet the truth she found was far crueler than she ever imagined. She remembered, in her past life, Nikra had once written a letter to the homeland. Back then she had been invited to a banquet. But afterward, both her maid and her guards mysteriously vanished. With no other choice, she wrote to her father asking him to send another maid. At the time, Rose had thought the maid had simply fled, unable to adapt to life there. Now it was clear, this was Rove's doing. And when she recalled the missing villagers, along with that sudden ominous cauldron, the answer became undeniable that it was all Rove's crime. Rose remembered, before the banquet she had come across one of Rove's so-called research papers. The title read, "The Correlation Between Magic and Flesh." Baryons were born with magic, and after his dissections he couldn't resist the madness within. He had slaughtered his own people. Her voice cut sharp as a blade. "That person who died, was it you?" Cold sweat trickled down Rove's back, yet he forced himself to remain calm. "They were merely test subjects," he insisted. His eyes flickered toward the cages nearby. Those were living subjects sent by Krugans, but he couldn't admit it, so he branded them all as condemned criminals. At his words, the prisoners erupted in panic, shouting over one another to deny the accusation. A chilling light flashed in Rose's eyes. "I don't care who they are. What I want to know is whether you plan to make me your next experiment." Still, Rove clung to his lies, muttering, "I only wish to pursue deeper research with the Empress." But the woman didn't believe a single word, her voice cut cold. "If it was truly research, why poison me? Such a ridiculous excuse." She refused to listen any further. Flames surged around her, pressing down with overwhelming force. "This ends here. Your experiments, your so-called plans, all of it will turn to ash." With those words, fire roared to life, spreading through the dungeon. Watching the Empress unleash such terrifying power, Rove froze. This strength was beyond anyone's reach. Her voice rang sharp. "Now explain yourself. Who sent you to harm me?" Rove, manic and deranged, covered his mouth and burst into laughter. At last he confessed, "It was the Kruger family. They are behind it all." The flames raged higher, yet the door had already been locked. Seeing no way out, Rove toppled the cabinet of potions in madness. Snatching up the only key, he hurled it to the ground and crushed it underfoot. "Die with me, burn with me," he roared. The Empress had never encountered someone more insane than herself. For a moment, even she was stunned. Then, with a sudden sweep of her hand, she hurled fire straight at Rove, unleashing the inferno upon his body. The man writhed in the flames, yet showed no regret. Only bursts of manic laughter spilled from his throat. And this wretch was considered a cornerstone of Chariot Empire's medical world. That if she killed him, medicine itself might stagnate. A loss too great for the Empire. Rose frowned, forcing back her fury. "About Krugans," she said coldly, "you'd better give me an explanation." But before he could answer, Rove staggered and collapsed to the ground. Rose brushed a strand of hair aside and walked away, her face calm. Whatever the chaos, she had emerged unharmed. If the medical world fell into turmoil, it would drag countless innocent civilians into misery. Even as Empress, such a decision was not hers alone to make. Outside the palace, Exon glanced at his watch, recalling the Empress's instructions. Realizing the appointed time had passed, he stormed in with his guards, scouring the dungeon with overwhelming force. But Rose was nowhere in sight. Just then, several ragged men stumbled out in panic. The guards drew their swords, but the men, desperate to live, cried out the truth. "We were imprisoned by Duke Rove and the Kruger family. Just now, a golden-haired woman burned the dungeon. We escaped in the chaos." Following the direction they pointed, the guards grew tense and rushed toward the hidden passage. Yet before they had gone far, Rose herself emerged from the passage, unscathed and composed. Seeing her guards arrive in time, Rose ordered sharply, "Arrest Duke Rove." The charges: attempted murder of the empress and illegal human experimentation. She then commanded the exits sealed. To prevent his allies from escaping. As for herself, she returned to the banquet. After all, a ball without its host was still hers to enjoy. In a quieter corner, a man stepped forward, politely asking Rose for a dance. She smiled faintly, declined with courtesy, though vigilance lingered in her heart. Yet once she refused one, others came one after another, each wearing kind, harmless smiles, clearly not Rove's accomplices. Just as she raised her hand to decline again, a large hand suddenly seized hers. The emperor, who had claimed last night he was too busy to attend, had secretly come after all. That he searched the hall for his wife, but her figure was nowhere to be found. Then he overheard whispers, "Where's the empress? She was just with Duke Rove. Could they have slipped away to whisper in private?" Jealousy boiled over. The emperor's expression darkened instantly. At that moment, guards burst into the hall. Following their gaze, the emperor finally spotted his beloved empress. He did not rush forward, instead leaning against the wall to listen in, certain that trouble had once again followed her. Though the banquet had fallen into chaos, every man's eyes remained fixed on Rose. Jealousy flared in the emperor's chest. Striding forward, he claimed his place with domineering presence. His face was cold, his tone accusatory, yet Rose could clearly see it was concern disguised as blame. Calmly, she explained the chain of events, her gaze finally settling on Rove lying on the stretcher. When the emperor's shock showed, Rose reassured him softly, "Don't worry that I didn't kill him." At her words, the man snapped back to his senses, though he still couldn't fathom how she had uncovered the truth. Rose bowed respectfully, deflecting all credit to him. "Using human lives for experiments is inhumane," she added. "Now that the truth is exposed, it will steady the hearts of the people. And their goodwill means their loyalty." The emperor barely followed her reasoning, but something unfamiliar stirred within his heart. Almost without thinking, he pulled Rose into his arms and kissed her. To him, it no longer mattered if Rove lived or died, only that his empress was safe. Those words, that touch, stirred memories of her past life within Rose. The emperor held supreme authority, yet his magic could only heal wounds. It was powerless in battle. A stark contrast to her destructive flames. As sovereign, he had little beyond the protection of his throne. Perhaps that was why he cared nothing for Barian secrets or politics. He cared only for Rose and being with her. Rose's eyes glazed over, her thoughts drifting, until the noise outside snapped her back. "Why can't we leave?" voices shouted. The guards replied patiently, "Duke Bazarov's accomplices have yet to be found. Please wait." Suddenly, the emperor clasped her hand, his words dripping with affection. "Come. None of this concerns us." The word "us" struck her like a spark. Rose froze in place. When he asked again, she finally smiled and nodded. Outside, the waiting guards caught sight of the scene. The warmth between them stunned him. Was this truly the same emperor who had always kept women at arm's length? By the night's end, news spread across the capital. The downfall of two noble houses stirred fierce debate. Duke Bazarov's true face was revealed, and his backers were unmasked, the Kruger family. Though Rove's fate remained unannounced, the sixth lady's household was doomed beyond recovery. That intimate moment between emperor and empress lingered in everyone's minds. Yet within Rose's heart, a question took root. Why had the emperor suddenly begun to care for her so deeply? Exion's arrival pulled her from her thoughts. Without his information, tonight's success would have been impossible. Holding the heavy pouch of reward money, he frowned. Surely this was far too much. But the empress thought otherwise. To her, it wasn't just a reward. It was repayment from her past life, and a quiet apology for the scars he bore. Noticing her unease, Exion offered, "Shall we take a walk through the city?" Out on the streets, with the breeze brushing past, Rose's mood indeed lightened. It was rare for her to have free time. Of course, she wanted to buy something she liked. Yet Exon seemed utterly uninterested in anything but work. Rose frowned, giving up on persuading him, until Exon suddenly stopped in front of a pet shop. She assumed he'd fallen back into that odd habit of wearing pet masks. But no, he was picking out a collar for her dog. Red and blue, a perfect match. Staring at the elegant collar, he even pictured walking the dog together someday. Just the thought brought a quiet smile to his face. No matter how Rose tried to stop him, Exon insisted on paying with his own money. Perhaps this was what people meant by loving her, loving even her dog.